This podcast provides information to help esports professionals identify and approach legal problems. This podcast is intended for informational purposes only. Legal information is not the same as legal advice, which is an application of law to a party's specific set of circumstances.
You should not and are not authorized to use this podcast as a source of legal advice. And the information in this podcast does not create an attorney-client relationship between the Law of Esports podcast, any of the lawyers or affiliates of the podcast, and any consumer of this podcast.
Welcome to the Law of Esports podcast, the number one podcast that discusses legal issues as they apply to the world of esports. My name is Jake Hicks, and I'm an attorney that represents teams, leagues, and organizations.
And my name is Nefi Lopez, and I'm an attorney that represents players, streamers, and personalities.
And today we have another fantastic episode in our series of Pro Ops episodes in which we interview individuals and professionals from around the esports industry. And today I cannot be more excited to introduce to you Mr. Mike Kent, the co-founder, co-owner of Dexerto. Dexerto, one of the largest purveyors of news in the esports space and also gaming and entertainment, and really a foundational piece of the structure that brings esports and gaming to the general public and really is an institution that's helped grow this community. Mike, we cannot thank you enough for joining us today, and we're really excited to have you.
Yeah, thanks guys. Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure. Obviously when you guys contacted me originally, I was, I liked the style and I liked the kind of the different angle you're going for. So yeah, pleasure to be here.
Hey, thank you so much, man. Thank you.
Oh, we appreciate it. And also thank you for joining us. Mr. Mike Kent, where are you at right now?
So I actually live in Edinburgh in Scotland, so the capital of Scotland. But I'm originally from a place called Newcastle in England. So it's like a 2-hour drive from Edinburgh to Newcastle. So I didn't move too far, but
nice.
Obviously with this job I've been able to manage. I've been able to do a lot more traveling outside of just those two locations, as you can imagine.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, well, we appreciate you being on. And for those that are watching on YouTube, if you look at Nefi and I's faces, it's currently about 6:30 in the morning for us. It's about 12:30 for Mike. But we really appreciate it. And really, we wanted to start off this podcast by just asking you, originally, where did you grow up and how did growing up there lead you into video games?
Yeah, so I grew up just outside of a place called Newcastle, which is kind of like it was a very working class town. It's kind of had to change its identity a lot because a lot of things haven't kind of panned out. So there's obviously a lot of like where the actual town where I'm from was always known as like a steelworks town. There used to be like a 2-mile long steel construction factory. Like the air used to be red. That was obviously before I was there. But yeah, we moved to this place. It's called Concert, although I'm from like a little town just outside of it. And it's kind of I never, to be honest, really liked being there that much. I've always been someone who likes kind of a bigger city, and also no discredit to anyone that likes this, but there's that kind of small town mentality. I felt like there was a lot of there. I don't think it's as bad now, but especially when I was growing up, when the internet was kind of, I'm 34, so I've kind of, the internet boom becoming to the masses, I was kind of one of the first people, or we were kind of the first generation of people to really have that. And I think you guys are similar age, so you kind of understand that as well. Like,
no, absolutely.
Yep.
I used to have a pager, so like, and my first experience on mobile internet was WAP, where it was like, it was 10p a minute and it would load and it would just be text on the page. I'm like, this is kind of pointless. Why am I even on this? But for some reason I kind of stuck with it. But yeah, so I'd had like I've got 4 sisters. So I've always had like been around a lot of people in the house, and always just kind of, growing up around people. And I was always able to kind of have a good relationship talking to people. But there's a period when I got to about 15 or 14, I can't remember the exact age, and I had been kind of like outside. I'd been like biking all the time, spending time with friends. And then what happened is that I kind of found computer games, and in a way, I kind of stepped back a little bit and from everything else because I was so invested in kind of, oh, you can play people online and all this kind of stuff. Like, I actually think I remember the first time that I used to play games like just single player games and stuff like that. But then I remember the first time playing an online game. I'd basically gone on a trip to Copenhagen with my family, and on the way there, I'd read a book called Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six or something like that.
Oh yeah.
Like, oh, that's cool. Read it. You know, I used to read books at the time. Not so much anymore. I should probably get back to that. And yeah, I used to play like I'd only been playing single player games, and then one day when I got back from Copenhagen, I saw an advert on the TV for Rainbow Six Black Arrow or Rainbow or it was either Rainbow Six Black Arrow or Rainbow Six, and it was kind of like the premise of the advert or commercial as you guys call it was it was like team play, like you chatted across, you play against each other online, and that was something that always kind of interested me because I'd never really got that satisfaction out of single player games because I was like, well, it's just me on my own, really. If you boil it all down,
right, yeah,
and kind of how my brain works a lot of the time is if you boil it all down, it's just you on your own, and it kind of lost the purpose for me. So I've not really played a single player game very much apart from say Grand Theft Auto or a couple of the Call of Duty campaigns when my internet was down. Really to that point. But this was in about 2002, and ended up getting on this game. I ended up going buying this game called Rainbow Six Black Arrow. Although I do remember the first time I actually bought it, I went and I was about to get on the bus to go home, and I went to buy some chewing gum or something, and I'm pretty sure I left it on the floor. And then when I got on the bus, I was like, oh, I don't have
my game.
Yeah.
So I ended up having to pay twice for it.
Oh, damn.
That's how committed I was.
Oh, man.
You know, considering that at the time didn't really have a huge amount of money at all being a kid, then that was interesting. But yeah, so I ended up getting on, started playing online, started playing against people, and this is on Rainbow Six Black Arrow. And eventually I was like, oh, I joined this lobby, which was full of basically people with this clan, because you could have like a clan tag, like
right, yeah,
which is in my bracket. And I joined this room of like 16 people, and like 12 of the people had ice next to their name, and they were all like chatting with each other and blah blah blah. And you know, being always someone that's been able to talk to any kind of person, or because I grew up in such a hectic household, and you know, I went to like a really rough school, so I'm not very tall. I'm like 5'8". People think I'm a lot taller, but I'm not. I'm a short king.
Yeah, Jake is about 5'8" too. So.
I love it.
Yeah, I'm a short king.
Well, in third grade, yeah, it was rough.
I like being 5'8" personally. There's a lot of benefits to it. And yeah, so because I was in this rough school, I'd always just kind of learned to kind of speak my way out of situations.
Yeah.
So and I'd always kind of ended up, you know, I've never been in a fight in my life because I've been able to speak my way out of any sort of altercation that ended up coming my way.
Yeah.
Well, I remember that one story you told us whenever you got punched in the face by that random guy whenever you were walking.
Yeah, that was
I guess that's your first fight.
Yeah, so that's what I mean. Like I knew that guy was going to knock me out, so I was like, well, I'm just going to keep walking. And obviously, slightly intoxicated at the time. But yeah, so I was playing. And I kind of just really started playing with these people, and I really just kind of withdrew from my kind of social life in the real world, so to say. So obviously I was still going to school. I played rugby, so I was playing rugby all the time. But I remember my mum was like, she told me later on that she thought, oh, he's got no friends anymore, and like, even though I did, and that like she was worried. But actually, what I was doing is building relationships and talking to people,
absolutely, from
around the world in games. So you know, I'd be playing with Americans, I'd be playing with all these people, and when I was playing these games, I kind of I realized I was actually better than most people playing the game. I'm not to say anymore that I am. I don't play enough, but even then, you know, if I play against a couple of my friends, then I'm probably going to be better than them, or anyone that doesn't have like extensive gaming background. I'm probably going to beat them in like an FPS because of the what's required.
Yeah, the understanding of the code, movement, and all that.
Yeah, exactly. So I realized that, you know, and I ended up going meeting a bunch of these guys. Like I remember when I was like, I think I was like 15 or 16. I don't know why my parents agreed to this, but this
Go meet some
random
strangers
guy,
from the internet.
Yeah, exactly. This random guy turned up, picked me up in a car, and we drove like 5 hours down the country to this like travel lodge where we met up with all these other people in the Ice Clan. And we used to just get, we just get like drunk and like, even though I was like 15, 16. It's pretty normal.
It's Europe. I guess it's Europe. Here in the United States, you're like, what?
Yeah, well, this isn't like 2003 though, too, right? I mean, this isn't like
it's supposed to be about 2004, 2005 at the time.
It's not like 1985 where everyone's like,
yeah. So ended up jumping in this random guy's car. He's flying down. He's smoking joints out the window, and I'm like, this is just
what have I got myself into?
Yeah, I was like,
incredible.
what am I doing? Like, I'm in this random guy's car. He's speeding. This car's like beat up. He's like smoking joints out the window. He's like chatting all this stuff, and I'm like, oh god, this is a bit mad. So anyway, I get all the way down there, but I had a great weekend, and it really kind of solidified that like online gaming could be something that was like interesting, and could be something that like could be something that there was like something was there. I never thought about it from a career perspective or anything like that, but I'd never been someone who'd been very good at anything. And what I mean by that is education wise. So if I'm not in, I think I've got some traits of like ADHD, ADD that I've never had diagnosed, but if I'm not interested in something, I really just don't apply myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I've worked on that over the years, because working in a business like Dexerto, you have to do things you don't want to do.
I was going to say, yeah, like writing.
Did you have an interest in journalism when you were growing up in school or anything?
Not at all. So I was terrible at writing. I was terrible. I wasn't quite as I was quite shy still. So obviously, as I said, I'd been able to kind of work my way out of various situations, but I was still quite shy. Didn't really know myself. I was, I'm a bit more of a stocky guy now. I've got a bit more presence about me, but I used to be kind of like short and skinny. I used to play rugby with like all these giant people, and like there'd be some games where I wouldn't even like get tackled or tackle anyone, because I was kind of always in a position that never needed it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I ended up with this. That was kind of my first introduction to kind of like online communities and gaming and stuff like that. But what happened is I kind of got a little bit frustrated with Ice, because it was often like we'd enter into like clan matches against other teams, and because it was kind of like that community feel, we'd bring in like the shit people, when I kind of always wanted like the best people to play.
Yeah, you want to win.
So I ended up breaking off with a couple of guys and started playing with this other team that we'd kind of come across, and that's really where my esports journey started. It was all game battles or compete, and it would be like clans and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And ended up getting into Call of Duty, which had come out. I think it was Call of Duty 2 we started playing a little bit, but then COD 3 came out. It wasn't really anything special in terms of online multiplayer. The functionality wasn't there.
Right.
But then when COD 4 came out, that's when it really kind of changed. So
yeah,
there was a bunch of people that I still know now that I used to play with back then. One of the guys is actually our insurance broker for Dexerto.
That's awesome, dude. Keep those relationships going, man. That's the key.
Yeah. What about the attorneys? Where are they at, man?
Yeah. Well, yeah. And the attorneys, unfortunately.
Right.
But yeah, so ended up sort of competing to a more higher level, and kind of like playing. We were like part of like the best teams in Europe, and it was quite intense, and you play all these different games and blah 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 blah.
Okay.
And then eventually, it got to there was eventually a LAN tournament got announced in Birmingham, in the UK, which was called XL4. They previously had it for Halo, but they couldn't do it for COD because they couldn't work out the LAN system. Something everyone takes for granted now, but back then, at the start of COD 4, there wasn't even lobbies. It was just randomly matchy with people. You couldn't like just set up your own private lobby.
Yeah.
Or you couldn't just see like a room that the people was in, which is what I was used to from Rainbow. So yeah, it kind of got to the point where it was like this tournament started happening. So I went and attended one, and I was just so bad. I was really terrible, and I just didn't live up to the pressure of when playing in a game. So I was like, I've got this better, and I knew as well there was better people on the team. So I was like, okay, I'm going to kind of do a kind of management style role with these people. So I kind of reached out to, at the time, there's a company called Lime. I think they still exist actually, and they had all these Turtle Beach headsets. I managed to secure us like a bunch of Turtle Beach headsets to sponsorship. So we had two different teams. You can actually see the footage from this event. I think it was like in 2008. or 2007. And by that time I'd started like, really kind of getting into that side of things. And also at the time it was called Team Identity, and we had a forum. And this forum, I was kind of active on, and I was kind of one of the moderators, and I'd moderate stuff and all that kind of stuff, like moderate what was going on. But what happened is after our team won that tournament, which was the first ever European card LAN tournament, my team won it that I was managing.
Nice.
And I think the other team came fourth. And they basically got picked up by Team Dignitas.
Early on, man. Yeah.
At the time. So, and what coincided with that is that I'd actually moved to France to work like a summer job at this place where basically it was like, it's a place called Eurocamp. So it's like big, large tents, and there's also like caravans and like static mobile homes that people would come and stay in overnight. And my job was like because my sister had done it before, which is why I knew about it, and I didn't really want to be where I was anymore. So I was like, okay, I'm going to move to France,
mix it
do
up
this
a little
for the
bit,
summer. And I completely changed as a person in that summer. I became like really outgoing, kind of learn how to talk to people a bit better, like how to get, in a way, get your own way, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And, how old were you during that time?
18 at the time then.
Okay.
So I'd just gone to France and stuff. So came back, worked in like a normal job. But what had happened when Team Identity had joined Dignitas is that someone else had set up a new forum called Dexerto, but it was Dexerto with a C, so DECERTO instead of the X. And when I'd been away on that second time, I went to the next summer. When I was there, I kind of started being like getting involved in the moderation and stuff like that. And I was like, oh well, we could write articles about what's happening with all these teams. Like there's always roster changes. Like we could interview people. Like what could happen there. And that kind of really developed over the years. Where we were basically. We kind of grew this site where all the European Call of Duty players would go to kind of connect about who to play competitively, because people were sick of just playing against random online people.
Right.
And they wanted to play against people who actually had some skill, because that's how people get better people, etc. So we had like really active forums. I mean, I think by the time I left in 2012, it was like we had like 100,000 members on there. Getting 500,000 page views a month, which at the time we obviously thought was pretty good.
Yeah.
But we started. So it was like, okay, well, we're doing these events are starting to happen more often. These esports events, and they're in places like Birmingham, they're in Amsterdam, they're in all these other places. And I was like, well,
Blackpool.
Blackpool, yeah. So at first, I used to pay my own way to attend events and actually record interviews at these events. So I just grab the players because they knew who I was because of the forum, and I just grab these players and be like, okay, let's do an interview. So we'd start doing interviews with these guys, and it got to like the point where we were getting like decent, like you can still see the videos like online now. Like in 2012, I was interviewing people like Nade Shot, Proofy, all those kind of COD pros.
Young Nade Shot.
So like it was like 2 weeks. It was crazy because I watch it back now, and it was like 2 weeks after his mum had died, and he still flew over and attended the event. And I was like asking questions about it, and in a respectful way, obviously. It's kind of like, it's a real moment in history that I forget I was part of. But the COD scene had grown quite large. But I'd got to the point in 2012 where I was like, okay, I'm getting to like, I think I was like early 20s. And I was like, well, what am I going to do with my life? Like, this isn't looking like it's going to be a career, because we've got all these people on the site, but we didn't really know what we're doing. And it was also just like a collection of people involved. Right. So I decided in 2012 to leave, and I moved at the time. I was living with a couple of guys who are now my co-founders with Dexerto. One of the guys was like, okay, I'm moving to London. And the other guy was like, me too. And I was like, I was kind of seeing this girl at the time. So I was like, in Edinburgh. So I was like, I'm going to go to Edinburgh and kind of see what happens there. And also I had some friends up there already, and kind of wanted that. And I thought, there's a bunch of.
You had your priorities straight.
I'd already lived in Edinburgh as well for a couple of years, so I'd kind of like worked there. I used to work like in a call center and all this kind of stuff.
Okay.
When I lived in Edinburgh, so I was like, okay, I'm gonna move up to Edinburgh, back up to Edinburgh, and I kind of just went and did like normal career style jobs. So I worked for a bank, doing anti-money laundering, which I was very underqualified to do.
So I was going to say that sounds intense, man. From somebody that used to work at a camp in France, now you're doing anti-money laundering.
Now you're doing AML work for cross-border transactions.
I'm like looking at these guys' bank accounts, trying to see if there's anything wrong with it. I'm like, listen. And again, because I wasn't interested, I was like, I'm not doing a good job here. They're going to find me out soon. And then I was like, okay, I'm good with people. I know a guy who works in recruitment. I was like, how do I get into recruitment? He was like, okay, I'll come and you can do an interview. You're lucky because we actually don't hire anyone that has previous recruitment experience. We only ever hire people that don't. So I was like, great. Went there, started working there for like a year and a half, and this got us up to about 2015. And I'd still been kind of in contact with the guys from Dexerto, so Chris and Josh. And what had happened with Dexerto when I'd left is that, you know, I was kind of really like on the ball with all the moderation. I'd make sure everyone was in line. And when kind of that authority left, it kind of impacted the website, it impacted the forum as well. And I'd really stopped kind of checking in with it. I'd stopped looking at it. And the website, and you know, they'd still attend events and do interviews and stuff, but I don't know, it just seemed to be pretty stagnant. And eventually kind of like, it wasn't really anywhere by about 2014, 2015. So what Chris and Josh did is they devised a plan to, okay, how do we take the basis of what Dexerto is and we turn it into a fully fledged company. So basically they contacted me when I was in recruitment, and actually weirdly in the office that's just outside this window, I can see the car park of where I used to work in recruitment, which I really didn't like either.
That's wild.
Yeah. PTSD every time you look at it. You're like, man, I can't believe this work there.
I sometimes see some of my former colleagues in the shop downstairs and stuff. It's very odd.
Still there.
And yeah, so I ended up. What was that? So yeah, they end up calling me one day and saying, look, we've got a small amount of investment. Do you want to come back and do this properly? So we'll do it as like a media company. We'll create news. Okay. We'll get rid of the forums. And we'll change the name as well to Dexerto with an X. So there's no affiliation with the previous one. It's just the idea.
one letter change, no affiliation with the last one.
One letter change. Then the old shareholders. Well, it wasn't even a company before that, so it's not like anyone can claim.
Yeah. So let me stop you, Mike. So let's kind of unpack, right? You just gave us a lot of information, and there's a lot of very important things that have happened through that little timeline, because you kind of just walked us through 2005 to about, I think we're 2012 now. And so
2015. So
okay.
Just to finish that point, in 2015, they basically called me and said, do you want to come back and do Dexerto? I quit my job that day, and then I've been doing it since.
Oh, damn. So it was like that. Yeah. Was it the difference that they were able to provide probably a little more financial security?
Well, that was it. I wanted a career, and I wanted to be earning money. That's always something I'd be motivated by. Right. So that's why I was kind of in jobs like recruitment or banking, because I was like, they're the jobs that must be able to, you know, you can progress. You can progress in those places.
Right. And so you start off, right, and one of and it's funny that you talk about Rainbow Six in such a, you know, the way that you do, because that was also one of the first games where I started playing competitively was Rainbow Six, but it wasn't Rainbow Six Black Arrow. I played a little bit of Black Arrow, but really where I really got into was Rainbow Six Vegas, the first one. I mean, I feel like that's one of the first games where they did it right. And me and my buddies, and we actually started a clan. That was my first exposure with clans, was also in Rainbow Six. And we started a clan in Rainbow Six Vegas called Black Arrow in honor of the previous one. And, you know, it was like BKA, and that was like our thing. And I mean, it has such a warm place, and it's totally different from what it was before. Now everything is about, you know, all these operators and all these things. Back then it was just like, you know, if you got a high enough level, you got to make your custom camo, and we did like crazy colorful camo and stuff like that. But so you started doing with that, and that's whenever you kind of first got into the competitive scene. And then, you know, and obviously some things happened during the course of your life where you were exposed to the right people. Now, at what point in your life would you say that, you know, it's sort of something clicked? Obviously, whenever Dexerto called you and said, hey, we can offer you some money to do this. But early in your career, you know, you always stuck with it, right? Like people like Jake and I, we played competitive early on, but our parents were very like, you know, Jake is from a small town in Texas called Conroe. I'm from a small town in Texas.
Bro.
Or I'm sorry,
Conroe's the biggest town next to Montgomery. That's how small that is.
Montgomery, Texas, and I'm from a small town in Texas, Tomball, Texas. So we played football, and our parents were like, you need to go to school. So we ended up going to law. We ended up going to law school eventually. Jake actually had a little stint in the NFL before he before. Yeah, a brief stint in the NFL. They said he was too small, which is kind of silly.
It's true.
I was kidding about Jake being 5'8". He's actually like 6'5". Jake is a monster.
In some circles, I'm a short king too, bro. And it's in
the NFL, Jake was a short king.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't have any basketball friends, put it that way.
Yeah. And so, and so I guess you always stayed in that scene with the old Dexerto with the C. Was it the relationships that you built? Because obviously one of the things that we've learned is, every time I hear you talk, it's always, you have to be able to be personable and have conversations with people in order for you to be able to succeed in the scene like we do, because everything is about community. And so what would you say would be like the key thing that kept you hooked to esports?
I think it was just that I was really interested in where it could go. I was always a big sports fan. So it was like, oh, this is kind of like sports. I got really into like the branding of different teams, and also I think it was just because I was pretty good at it, or at least I thought I was good at it. So that's
half the battle, I feel like.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought I was good at it. So I was like, okay, I can see more people signing up to the website. I can see more people commenting on each news post. So it was kind of like it kind of just grew. And I was obviously interested in playing games as well, and it was kind of that hybrid. And although my parents might have had concerns, they were always kind of really supportive, and never kind of push back on it. And my dad always says, "Oh, you knew this." When esports was like blowing up in like 2016, 2017, and all that, he was like, "You saw this happening, and you saw this happening before anyone else did," kind of thing. Which I don't think is necessarily strictly true, but I did.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry. I have a quick question because, we have you on the podcast. I'm super excited. And Nefi and I have been following the scene for a long time. My question is about EGL 5.
Yeah.
Blackpool.
Yeah.
Apex Esports.
Yeah.
You essentially are managing for that tournament.
Yeah.
One of the biggest rosters in esports at the time, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're one of the biggest rosters in esports history generally. But at the time, Apex Esports shows up with Merc, Scump, Rambo, Big Timer. And Big Timer was already the winningest player in esports in terms of money in North America.
Yeah.
So is there a reason why you chose the more journalism route versus a talent management route when you were already working with some of the biggest names in the space?
Yeah. So when it came to EGL 5, it was like, because Dexerto wasn't really paying anything. I think I was getting like the equivalent of like $100 a month in about 2011, 2012. And this, I can't remember how, but I think it must have been through the forum. This German guy shows up and he starts like paying all this money to all these teams. And I was like, fuck it, I'll get in on that. I don't
let me get in on that.
I don't care where that money's coming from. And he actually didn't end up paying a lot of people, but I ended up getting the cash that I was owed anyway.
Nice.
I think they approached me and were like, "Oh, can you write on the site? Can you do some news posts on the site?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And then when it came to EGL 5, I kind of just, I can't remember how it came about, but I think I knew they'd already signed this team and said they were going to give them money, and they were like, "Oh, can you just have someone we just need someone who's gonna be at the event, and then show the guys around, make sure they're all right." So I was like, yeah, fine, I'll do it. Why not? Team coming from America, that was always my kind of like dream, was to see international competition in COD. We'd seen a few random tournaments happen in America where British teams had been there, but which also I'd been part of, but they'd never been, which was Team Identity, but they'd never been, they'd never been, I'm trying to think what I'm saying. So I just totally had a brain.
Like they've never been they've never been like formally organized.
Yeah, it was never like proper competition. It was never like in a proper LAN environment where it was fair. It was like they'd go over and play on like 32-inch TVs, sat on stools, and there'd be explosions going off in the background. It wasn't a competitive environment. Which some of the older footage of that is hilarious. I think like one of my teams played against Clayster back in the day, for example.
Nice.
But yeah, so I ended up just agreeing that I'd go and like help them out, and so I went and met them at the airport and kind of brought them to the hotel, and just helped them the whole weekend. And I was taking pictures at the time. I had a camera and doing videos, and I was taking pictures of all the people in the event and stuff like that. So kind of just developed a relationship with them then. And that kind of just carried on after that. Because also the two of the guys involved in Dexerto now, Chris and Josh, they were basically basically running EGL. So that event was ran by them. So obviously they had, and I was kind of, I think, living with them at the time. So it was kind of like they knew this team was coming over, and I was already part of this organization. Can't remember what it was called now. Apex.
So how? And sorry, were those guys part of the ICE, or did you meet them later down the road?
I met them down the line. Yeah, met them at events.
Okay.
And we actually, my team Identity, beat Chris and Josh's team, which was Reason Gaming, in the final of that first ever LAN tournament. Yeah.
Okay. And so, nice. and what do you think was why those guys keep coming to you? Because obviously, you've got to pay your bills somehow, and so you chose to follow a career. You moved to a city where your girl was, and you were already established. And then later down the road, they're like, "Hey, dude, we got some funding. Come back." Yeah. What do you think about you? Was it just a relationship you had with those guys, and because you were in the scene and you knew?
Yeah. I had a great relationship with them. I'd lived with them. They were two of my best friends. So, I knew they'd been looking to get funding, but I was kind of like, "Oh, it'll never happen," sort of thing.
Yeah.
I'm the kind of person that doesn't get excited by things until it happens. So
yeah.
You're like, if you say to me like, "Yeah, we're gonna next week we're gonna take you to Vegas and we're gonna put you up in this hotel and blah blah blah," I probably wouldn't be that excited until I was like on the plane.
Until you're like, "Oh shit, you're on a plane on your way to Vegas."
Yeah, I'd assume before that it's probably something's gonna happen where it's not gonna work. It's just probably a bad mindset to have, but
okay.
That's kind of how in my brain operates.
These guys reach out to you and they're like, "Hey, dude, we got some funding. Come work for us." You said you quit your job that day.
Yeah.
And then so then what happens after that?
So then the whole idea of what we wanted to do is we wanted to be the ESPN of esports, but we're initially just going to focus primarily on Call of Duty because that was where all our experience was. But I'd been out of it for like 3 years, so I had to come back and kind of learn everything that had happened. We still weren't sure if we were going to keep the forum, which we ended up not keeping. And we'd had this website built that was supposed to have all this functionality, but it didn't because it was trash. By a shit developer. I don't even know who he was. Sorry if he's watching.
No, that's fine.
So
it's a fun comment. You're saying it nicely.
Yeah, exactly. And my job initially when we started the website was I was the one that would write all the articles. So I'd be the one that'd go out and attend events with either Chris or Josh, where we'd go and attend event. And at the time when we'd attend events in 2015, 2016, there was no press rooms really. There was the odd time there was. I think the first event we went to actually was COD Champs in 2015. There was a press room there, but it was like a bunch of tables separated by a curtain. And again, there's just all this noise going on. And
the background noise.
And it was still like when we wanted to interview the players, basically what I learned pretty quickly is that we had to develop relationships with the players. So I'd go up to the players and just say, "Can we do an interview?" And just almost pull them to one side. And I had to do that for years until like Activision really got involved, and then they started giving like you access. But before that, I'd just walk into the player lounge and be like, "Nameless, let's do an interview right now," and then just stick a camera in front of his face.
Dang.
And at the same
and that
time,
was you. You were the one that was recording all that and taking the pictures and doing the interviews.
Yeah, so I'd interview. So sometimes I'd go to an event on my own, and I would have a camera, which was it was a Canon. Can't remember the model.
Yeah.
And it didn't even have a flip out screen. So I'd sometimes actually
you had a viewfinder,
stand in front and do the interview, and sometimes I didn't even know if it was recording.
You were in the frame at all.
Sometimes if I was in frame, sometimes it would just stop. And then what I'd do once I'd recorded that is I'd take it back, go to my laptop, and then edit the video and then upload it straight to YouTube and Twitter or whatever. So it was like I was doing the full thing. So I'd be going to events and doing like 15, 16-hour working days. And then you go out, and then I knew the value of kind of networking. So then I'd go out and party with all the players. I'd go out and party with all the players. And then you're waking up 4 hours later and then you do another 16-hour day followed by another drinking session. And then you do that for 4 days. And
we know that all too well.
Yeah.
And I think it's the most fun part about what we do.
That's the loyal.
That is actually the fun time. Yeah. That's true.
I think the last time we did that was at DreamHack in Dallas. Actually, a lot of guys made it out, and
DreamHack was a struggle. But by that Sunday, it was
we had to hydrate because we were business meetings all day, and then every night we'd be like, all right, man, where we going tonight? And the last night ended up being the hotel, bar. But dude, those guys, man.
So outside of player interviews and covering events, in the early days of Dexerto with an X, the one we know today, what was your process for developing articles and developing stories?
So it would be just, at first it was like, okay, what kind of content we want to do. So we were kind of like looking like, okay, obviously you do stuff like the big ones were like roster moves. So you'd find out a team had changed. Usually you'd have to kind of work it out, whether it be by someone communicating on the forum or you'd have to go and I don't know, some people would contact you, or you just kind of just had to work it out what was going on based on Twitter, or Twitter was a big way. So someone would post a roster update, you write an article on it, and I was doing sometimes and then I'd interview players and try and get information from them that way, etc. And sometimes I'd be doing 15 articles in a day. Not great quality by any means. If you looked at them now, I'm pretty sure they'd be mistake-ridden. I actually don't think I even knew how to write properly until I started writing on a website. And I kind of just learned how to write over that process. So my early work was terrible. And then also, these big personalities, the people that we knew were getting the big, I'd do interviews with players and whatever as well, like written interviews. Yeah. So I'd just reach out and be like, oh, can I do an interview? And then they'd send me back a DM with, the words and whatever. And at first it was just kind of like, okay, how do we expand beyond just COD? And we noticed that we started going to CS:GO, for example, in other games, and we noticed that some of the people that were big popular players were moving on to be content creators. So they were moving on to, and then it was like, okay, well, what happens if we cover those people doing the content creation? And they're talking about various things on stream or in YouTube videos, and we're just picking bits out of those videos to make into an article. And we really, in this space, I think we really pioneered that aspect of kind of finding a story from nothing. And sometimes it was really nothing, the story. But over time, we've got a lot better at that And
I'm glad you bring that up, because I noticed early on, you guys were very Call of Duty heavy, and there was sort of a shift from just Call of Duty to just general content creation. Because I think obviously we all notice now, I remember one of the bigger guys that I followed early on was Shroud, whenever he used to do competitive CSGO.
Exactly.
And then he's whenever he retired and said, I want to do full-time Twitch streaming. And look at him now. I mean, he's huge. And so at what point did you guys decide, hey, Call of Duty's not going to cut it, we got to shift over to content creation as well? Did something happen where you guys are like, we need to kind of expand?
It was around the 2016, 2017 kind of time. So I'd known Ninja since 2012, because when he'd come over and played in a Halo tournament in 2012, he'd actually come back and stayed at the house that I was staying at. And there was T-Squared, Strong Side, Mick Wen, and they were all there, and we'd go out in Manchester and party. So I kind of had that relationship. We had something of a relationship with him at the time. And so I remember me and Josh we used to do the Dexerto podcast, which was a weekly thing. And we managed to get Ninja on it after that Drake thing. So we were the first website the first outlet to get kind of any sort of interview with Ninja after he'd done the Drake stream. And I think that really helped.
That's huge.
Fortnite was blowing up. That really helped.
Yep.
And we just kind of was like, okay, there's obviously we quickly realized there's a ceiling with esports. That there isn't in the content creation game. So that's how we kind of branched out. So it was esports, gaming news just in general, because what we were covering gaming updates anyway, because it's well, if there's an update in COD, how does that affect the esports scene? So we were already kind of covering gaming a little bit. Then we started covering, and then these players like Optic, they'd be do a funny video and they'd say something funny in it and we'd report on it. So we were already kind of doing that. And then it just kind of expanded over time to be covering everything. And now esports is, still part of our strategy, and always will be, but it's probably the smallest element of Dexerto now in terms of output compared to, say, gaming or entertainment influences.
Right. So one of the things.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Jake. Just to kind of highlight this point a little bit. One of the things I guess for you guys that you saw live was basically when I remember very vividly when it happened. Whenever Drake, I guess, on Twitter hooked up with Ninja, and then they streamed together, and that day they, I guess, for lack of a better term, they broke the internet. Is that whenever you guys were like, holy crap, this is pulling a lot of numbers? There's a lot more people that play and watch video games than we thought, so we should kind of incorporate that.
We'd already been diversifying towards that, but I think that was just confirmation that we were going in the right direction, basically.
Okay.
So it was like, we know we're going in the right direction because look at the numbers that we're getting for our articles that we're writing about this. We were already getting decent numbers when Fortnite came out for updating the patch notes and everything like that. We were part of that craze. We used to be the top ranking website pretty much every week for Fortnite patches and updates and analysis. So the next step was to, what are these content creators saying? And
what can we take? Yeah.
We grew it from a team of just me writing articles originally, and then we brought on more people, some volunteers.
So crazy.
First, and then more and more writers as we went on.
It's crazy to hear how Fortnite catapulted all these content creators into where they are now. And you guys looks like got a little piece of that. Wow.
Probably the unsung hero of Dexerto's success.
That's awesome.
Well, so speaking of, Dexerto has a pretty massive growth between 2015 and 2020. In that 5-year time frame, it just explodes. And over that time, how have you found Dexerto or your relationship with content creators change? Because I just remember there was Nate Schott was on a podcast in 2019 where someone asked him a question. And he said, well, look, I don't want to answer that because I know tomorrow there's going to be an article on Dexerto and it's going to blow up and I don't want that to be out there. And when you guys want to be the ESPN of esports and gaming, that's kind of in traditional sports, you don't want to wear a purple hat, for instance, because there might be an article on ESPN that you're going to the Vikings the next day or something. And that's out there. But how have you found that relationship change as Dexerto's grown?
Yeah, it's been really difficult because we got a lot of resistance at the start. And still do to this day from people that basically just these content creators, a lot of them, and a lot of these esports players, they fundamentally do not understand because they've never been taught the value of media and what that actually means to their brand. So they see us writing about them as a negative, but actually it's a positive. And if they don't see that, and actually if the people that we used to write about in the best light were the people that would come to us and talk to us and give us, give us exclusives and talk about us and, all that kind of stuff. But, a lot of people kind of push against it. We, even to this day, we had Pokemon the other day saying, I'm sick of Dexerto writing articles about us. And it's like, you're one of the most popular players in the world. There's a demand for people to read about what you're saying. Nobody's going to sit, not everybody's going to sit and watch your full stream. We're taking something you've said, and we always check around it to make sure it's not out of context. She didn't provide any examples where it was out of context, for example, because she wouldn't be able to. And, we're reporting, that's what happens. That's how the world works. But these people just don't understand that because they've never had a real job. They've never been in the real world, a lot of these people. And
they're young.
And it is slowly changing because there's agents getting involved. There's management companies, and they get in the training and they get in the understanding of you can't say this on stream, you can say this on stream. I mean, there's a period where people were just saying absolutely anything, and we'd obviously report on it, and they'd be like, "Why are you reporting on that?" And it's like, you've said it, in the public domain to thousands of people, and you're now worried about it being published as an article when you've already said it. It's that we've always been fighting with that, with people on that. There's been a few times with COD players who felt like we were kind of favoriting other teams to them. I had that big bust up with Hastro once on Twitter.
We know about that.
Clayster and Crimsix, they'll never do articles for Dexerto, for example. And it's just one of those things. It's like people don't understand the value of media, or they just didn't like the fact that they were getting reported on what they were actually saying.
Yeah. And I'm so
when it comes to,
go ahead, Jake.
One more question on that part. Cause I know a big value for us, if we're doing a deal and going through due diligence, or if there's a big deal about to break, one thing that we'll utilize with the press, not only in gaming and esports, but generally, is press embargoes and deals with, journalistic entities. Do you find that when it comes to press embargoes, do you ever approach the content team, or is that something that they really need to approach you for to create an embargo and a safer environment for that info?
As my content, do you mean my content team, or do you mean the content creators?
They're the content creators, yeah. Because now it's a lot of teams and agents and stuff.
Yeah, so we have really good relationships with a lot of different creators and their agents and teams and orgs. You know, for example, FaZe Clan, they'll tell us up to a week in advance what their next news is going to be through our embargo process. And as a result, they know we're not going to post about it. That we're not going to post about it until the agreed time, because then if we don't, then we're not going to get any more embargoes. So, you know, it's that constant game of like, I've the amount of times that I've learned things from people, and I've already agreed to an embargo with someone else, so I wasn't able to publish it. It's been a lot. So there's been a lot of scoops that I've not been able to do because I've honored the word of the embargo. And I think that's what a lot of creators haven't really understood, is that they can come to us and contact us and advise us of what's going to happen, and then we're not going to actually post about it because we're going to respect that, because that's journalistic integrity, isn't it? So,
right.
Yeah.
And what I was going to say earlier is I'm glad that you brought that up, because I was going to be sort of kind of the segue that we were heading towards is the relationship between content creators, pro players, and then journalistic, you know, entities like Dexerto. You know, one of the things that we've noticed, and it's changed over the years. I'm sure you asked me 5 years ago, a lot of these guys have no idea what they're doing. They don't know anything about business. They don't know anything about contracts, and they don't know anything about really the business and the stuff that really matters to make this a money thing. Now it's completely different. A lot of these guys, like you said, are a lot more savvy. Some of these, 13, 14-year-old kids that I'm talking to now, they know a lot more than what I knew whenever I was 13 to 14. And one of the key things that I noticed is that I don't think they've gotten the right guidance as far as how to develop a good relationship with, because obviously you guys have to do what you guys have to do. And sometimes if it means discussing or highlighting a negative aspect on a streamer's or, a content creator's life, that's what you guys have to do. But, I think there absolutely has to be some type of education for content creators and, just people, just personalities in general, as to how to handle these situations in relationship with you guys. Have you noticed that a lot of these guys, I guess, out of fear, kind of avoid you guys, and whenever you guys reach out for comments, they don't respond? Or what's the relationship right now? Has that gotten better?
I think it's a real mix. So I think some people see the value in it, some people don't. I think when people are a certain size, when some of these creators are arguably bigger than Dexerto in a way, in terms of like the raw numbers that they can achieve on a stream or on a tweet or something like that, those people don't see the value in us as much. But when it comes to, there's a lot of creators that do. So, I have a great relationship with a lot of them. I've built relationships with people of all different sizes in the industry. And there's a lot of people that if we write something about them and then they're like, oh, that's not actually true, this is the case, then, we'll get that updated. And that's what people don't understand, is that we're not like this closed book that people can't, if something's wrong, we'll absolutely change it and we'll update it. And sometimes it is going to be wrong. It's just the nature of media, just as they get things wrong when they're a streamer.
Yeah.
Streamers for some reason seem to think that we can't make mistakes, but they can. It just
no, and it's a tough relationship.
Always trying to build those relationships, and always trying to I'm always trying to build relationships with creators. We've done a bunch of originals videos where I've been able to get close to a bunch of big names, and I've got good relationships with a lot of the big players in the industry. But so again, just depends. Sometimes people get upset about things they've said getting reported on.
Okay.
Yeah.
And going forward, do you guys have any big plans, anything major in the pipeline for Dexerto for people to keep an eye out for?
I think we're just going to continue just on this trajectory of growing out. We're obviously working with them big commercial partners. We want to work with more creators. We want to bring more functionality to the website. We want to create more social accounts. We just want to keep growing everything out, really. Building and building. So
what do you see any more categories?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've just launched our TV and movies section on the website. We're also getting into tech. We've started a much more concentrated attack on like the games industry in terms of like reviews, which we hadn't really done before. and we brought in people with great experience from outside the industry, outside of esports and influencer world to come in and help us. And I think it's like it's a mix between trying to keep that experience of the industry and also bringing in people who understand how it works elsewhere. I think that's always what we're trying to do.
And let me ask you this, as far as and talking on that same note where Jake is asking, whenever there's big things like, you know, for example, the big the Activision, you know, versus the cheat code manufacturer lawsuit.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's, you know, a lot of organizations, a lot of large journalism have like their legal analyst or somebody that talks about those things. Is that something that you guys have or plan to develop, or who do you guys have talk about things like that?
Yeah, so we've done it in the past, where we've reached out to different lawyers on stuff that's happened, like the Tfue case. I'm pretty sure we spoke to one of our lawyers at the time got him to talk about that. But yeah, it's I think the legal side of it's always interesting. It's just, how do you make it interesting to the average person?
Yeah, that's the waters that we're trying to navigate right now. Is trying to put out content and make that stuff what we call sexy.
I can always hit you guys up if I've got any legal questions.
Yeah, no,
come
absolutely.
on, man, we got you. So yeah, that's a hard thing because I've written articles for the Esports Observer, but their articles have to be cleared by my law firm, and they want them to be very informational. And they're not like a law review article where they're exclusively like a brief, but they're also a little more involved than some fun update article.
Yeah. I always find when I speak to a lawyer about something, it's always like, it's very void of opinion.
Yeah. Which is, and it's sad.
It's always very by the book. So it's almost like it doesn't really matter which lawyer you speak to, really.
You're gonna get analysis, and that's the thing. It's kind of the training that we have, because there's a liability to what we say. Good or bad things can happen. People are sort of afraid to take a stand on a position, which is smart, right? Obviously there's a lot of things where they ask me and I'm just like, look, let me tell you kind of the analysis. The question about what the court would do, that's a whole different question. And so, and that's kind of what we're trying to navigate. We're trying to figure out, how can we talk about a complex subject? Because it's important and people need to know, right? Like you know, I don't know how closely you follow the show, and I know where our relationship is pretty new, but we're going to be putting out a series of episodes discussing like contracts, right? These are the things that these guys need to worry about, and you know, we're waiting for some things to line up before we put those out, because we know those are going to be big hitters. Because there's nobody out there that explains them in a way to where it applies specific to esports and it's entertaining, because that's the key part. A lot of these guys, that's why Twitter's so popular, because, you know, you have, I don't know, a little over 100 characters, and, you know, their attention span goes. And so you got to figure out, how can I make this as interesting as possible, but also as succinct as possible? Because I think the brevity is important. A lot of people think,
I need to make it as visual as possible.
Exactly, that too. Right, and that's what we've learned.
Just really get after it.
If it's just people talking, people don't listen. So you've got to make it really visual. I'd use visual stuff as much as possible. Would be my advice.
Yeah.
Well, and so that's the other thing that I think we really, I don't know, and maybe us, but also content creators in general. Like I remember early Call of Duty content would be someone like Nadeshot talking about a roster update, but it would be over a gameplay of something. So you just have something to kind of watch and keep you visually busy. For us, you know, it's a little bit different, because I guess, so Nefi represents the little guy all the time. And by little guy, I mean players who are no longer little guys most of the time. And then I've represented mostly leagues and orgs and companies and stuff. Yeah. And so we have that dynamic, which we find really interesting. But we found when it comes to like players and people like that they may not care as much about that dual perspective and really want something more engaging. And so we're always looking for different ways to expand. Yeah. But we also look to leaders in the industry like yourself and like Dexerto for ways to keep people entertained.
Yeah. You know? And Jake and I stay in the background, right? We've always, because one thing that's unique about us is we're trial lawyers, right? There's a lot of law firms out there that are like, oh yeah, we'll draft this contract for you. We could do that too. But I think where our sort of experience is unique is, you know, we're trial lawyers. Like, not only have I drafted a contract, but I've litigated a contract. Whenever things hit the fan, you know, I'm there and I know what's going to stick and what's not, because I've tried a case to a jury or I've tried a case to a judge, and I know where, you know, these are going to be the pitfalls. And so we're trying to, and like I said, our podcast is pretty young and it's new. And esports in general, although you've been in the scene, since early 2000s. It's still really young, and people sometimes think, oh, it's too late. There's no reason for me to get in because it's developing, and this. You guys are.
Yeah, it's definitely
what are we? 2022.
Sure.
Yeah, and so.
Sure.
Look, but getting back to what you're doing with Dexerto, and live events are now coming back.
Yeah,
which everyone's grateful for. Are you attending anything coming up?
I'm not personally, but with Dexerto might be. It just really depends. It's kind of like it's the opportunity cost, isn't it? It's like what can we get back from attending these events?
Yeah,
sometimes just use isn't enough.
Yeah,
so it's just working out what you can, what's worth going, what you're going to get access to. Because where in the past you might have had, no access, but you could get access to people. Now it's like there's no access and you can't get access to these people because they're superstars. So it's like, it really just depends.
It's so crazy.
Yeah.
Well, I'll throw this out there. To the extent that you attend an event in the future, and to the extent that event is in Texas, let us know. And
absolutely.
Beers and tacos are on the Law of Esports crew.
Yeah.
Wow, that sounds ideal.
So
yeah. And I know, some of the guys that in Texas, like Hex, have their opinion on tacos. We tend to agree with a lot of them, but we've got some spots that, if you ever come to Houston, man, it's the hot spot for food and
city.
You got to come. You got to come check it out. We got NASA, so I don't think anybody else can say they got NASA. Whenever
that's true.
The spaceships are in space, they say Houston, we have a problem, and we're in Houston,
that is true.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, we're getting close to the hour mark. I know I know there's a lot of things that we can talk about with you, but obviously we value your time. We really appreciate you taking the time to come here and talk to us. And so on a closing note, with all the experience that you've had throughout the years, you've got almost 20 years in the industry. I'd say you, along with your partners, you guys have been in it from the beginning. What are some tips? Obviously not legal tips per se, but what are some things that you wish, that if you can convey, let's say we have a new content creator, we have already established content creators, some things for them to keep in mind, so that way you guys aren't writing a negative story on them or they're in the bad light.
I think just communication, isn't it? It's communication's key. If you've said something and we report on it and they don't, it's just communication. I think that's the key thing. And also it's just, I feel like this industry takes itself very seriously. And I don't think it necessarily needs to do that. There's some necessity things that are like legal stuff you have to take seriously, obviously. But I think as well, just like people need to have a bit more fun, and people need to, I think that's, we've always tried to report on the light side of stuff, like viral stuff where people mess up and set the kitchen on fire or, whatever. I think just people need to people need to just be a bit more relaxed and more, and realize
everybody's intense.
This industry is about entertainment. Why is everyone so tense?
Interesting. Okay. Well,
awesome.
Jake, I don't know if you've got anything else.
No, that was awesome. So Mike, it's been awesome getting to know you. Thank you so much for joining us. If possible, we'd like to have you on again in the future, especially as we see Dexerto develop and grow with the space. We're super excited to see that growth and to see continued success. So thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, and if you ever need anything in the future, man, you can always reach out to us. We're only a DM away, and we'll talk at the end of the show and get you our contact information. But thank you so much for your time, man. Really appreciate it. Everybody, go follow Mike and Dexerto. We're huge fans. I think you guys should be as well. As always, feel free to follow us on all socials. The Law of Esports on Instagram, Twitter. We got Mike Kent, and with Dexerto, and you guys know who he is. I don't think he needs any more introduction. But thank you guys so much for joining us. Mike, thank you so much again.
Thanks very much, guys. Cheers.
Thanks, guys.